What if the oldest wisdom isn't about answers, but about never stopping to ask questions? In a world that treats certainty like a trophy, Socrates would stroll the agora carrying a quiet, stubborn flame. Keep the questions alive, even when the crowd wants conclusions. In this light, there is a theory that rarely gets a microphone. Not a doctrine about how much we know, but a careful method about how we approach knowing. The theory no one discusses says that wisdom begins with the posture of not knowing, and that learning flourishes when we curate ignorance as a practice, not a defect. I'm calling it the theory of intellectual hygiene, a name that hints at discipline and care. It asks us to clean the mental air we breathe, to strip away the easy certainties that crowd out real inquiry. Imagine stepping into the Athenian sun, the market humming with debate, the sound of sandals on stone. Socrates doesn't march in with a parade of answers. He arrives with questions that sting a little like a chill breeze in a sunlit square. He doesn't pretend to know the coastlines of virtue or the precise measure of courage. Instead, he asks, what do we mean by virtue? How would we test that claim if we had no authority to enforce it? His method isn't polemics, it's diagnostic. Through patient questions, he reveals the fog between opinion and knowledge, not to mock anyone, but to invite a clearer map of what we actually know and what we merely suppose. The theory rests on a paradox. The more confident a claim, the less room there is to test it. The mind, when certain, becomes a closed room. The theory invites us to leave the door ajar tiny, almost invisible, so that new evidence or new angles can slip in. It's not about dissolving conviction into relativism. It's about reordering conviction so that it can bend under scrutiny without shattering. It's about learning to love the friction between belief and counterexample, because that friction is where understanding accrues. Picture the agora not as a battleground of egos, but as a workshop of minds. People speak, then pause. Then listen to the hush between words, where the possibility of being wrong hovers like a cautious wind. The theory of intellectual hygiene treats that hush as sacred. It asks us to curate our claims as a gardener curates light and shade, keeping enough space for growth, pruning certainty when it grows wild and choking. Consider a modern classroom. If you teach only what is proven, you teach certainty. If you teach how to test what is claimed, you teach inquiry. The theory suggests a curriculum built like a harbor, a safe inlet for doubts, a sturdy pier for experiments, a lighthouse that guides but never proclaims itself the final word. It's a design for thinking that resists the seductive arc of self-certainty, an antidote to the online scroll where a bold assertion is currency and nuance is a password you forgot. The twist here is not that ignorance is good, but that ignorance, properly tended, can be a loyal partner to knowledge. When we acknowledge what we don't know, we free the mind from the tyranny of being right all the time. The theory demands two practices. First, we phrase our beliefs as questions we're willing to test. Second, we listen for the counterexample more earnestly than we hunt for confirmation. It's a radical act of intellectual hospitality. You invite doubt to stay for tea, not to ruin the party, but to remind everyone why the conversation matters. The method doesn't end at a polite shrug. It produces counterfactuals, questions that push against the boundaries of what we accept as true. If Socrates walked into a boardroom today, he would deliver a verdict. He'd run a symposium of doubts, challenging the room to demonstrate how its certainty withstands critical pressure. In that sense, the unplugged Socrates isn't anti-knowledge. He has pro-clarity by refusing to let certainty masquerade as insight. There's a danger in simplification that we all recognize from social feeds. Answers arrive fully formed, and questions arrive as afterthoughts. The theory of intellectual hygiene counters that pattern by insisting on the architecture of inquiry. It asks us to build scaffolds of thought that can be tested, repurposed, or dismantled without shattering the person at the center of the argument. It's a quiet rebellion against the speed of belief, a commitment to a pace that respects the mind's capacity to adjust when presented with new evidence. Let me offer a concrete example. A CEO proclaims, "Automation will save us," with a chorus of data and dashboards. The unplugged approach asks, what are we assuming about what saving means? Are we measuring human well-being, not just profits? What if a cheaper automation changes work so profoundly that well-being declines in certain teams? The theory would have the executive pause, reframe the claim as a question, and invite a cross-check between numbers and lived experience. The outcome isn't a denial of progress, but a more nuanced progress, a path that holds room for unexpected consequences and for the people who bear them. The turning point arrives when we realize that this theory isn't a solitary practice, it's a social skill. It asks communities to design dialogues that resist the gravity of certainty. In politics, in science, in intimate relationships. The unplugged stance keeps rooms open for dissent, for revision, for those small doubts that keep a system from becoming brittle. It's not a rejection of evidence. It's a discipline about how we treat evidence and how we respond when it contradicts us. The theory translates into rituals. Start meetings with a question you don't know how to answer. End debates with a summary of the strongest counterarguments. Keep a small file of disconfirming data you revisit monthly. Over time, this becomes a culture one that doesn't fear being wrong, but fears never testing what is believed. The deeper message is not merely cognitive, it's moral. If knowledge is not a door, but a pathway, then humility becomes the map. The theory of intellectual hygiene reframes knowledge as a cooperative project with the future. It invites you to protect your own thinking and to protect others from the tyranny of certainty. It's a call to move through life with a lightness that does not dishonor conviction, but refuses to confuse conviction with finality. In a sense, to unplug is to reconnect to reality, to one another, to the stubborn, beautiful possibility that we are always learning something new about what we don't know. So how would you practice this tomorrow? Start with a single daily ritual. Take one belief you hold tightly, write it as a question, and deliberately seek at least one credible counterexample. Then, forcibly hold space for the counterargument in a conversation you value. If you can do that consistently, you'll notice something. Not a flood of certainty, but a steady, quiet flexibility that allows you to adapt without erasing you. You'll see that the richest intelligence isn't the loudest voice, but the one that models how to stay curious when a room grows loud. This is the essence of Socrates' unplugged theory that says wisdom is not the final answer, but a discipline of asking well. It's not a rejection of knowledge, but a patient stewardship of it. It asks us to become gardeners of thought, pruning bravely, composting failure into future insight, and letting wonder shape our decisions more often than certainty does. As the day ends and the agora fades, I'm reminded of a simple truth. The mind thrives in a climate of honest doubt. Not paralyzed doubt, but purposeful, practiced doubt that points toward growth. If Socrates appeared in our time, I suspect he'd smile at the irony. Unplugging from the noisy certainty of our era to plug into the deeper current of inquiry. The theory would be a quiet invitation to live more thoughtfully, more ethically, and with a touch more awe for the unknown. So I'll leave you with this question to carry forward. What belief would you reframe as a question today? If you allowed yourself to test it with genuine humility? The answer isn't a verdict, it's a doorway, and stepping through it might just make room for a wiser tomorrow. Imagine a morning routine built around doubt as a healthy habit, not a threat. You pull from your bag one stubborn question, and you test it against 3 unlikely counterarguments before breakfast. You record the outcomes, not as verdicts, but as weather reports for your thinking. In organization, this looks like postmortems that celebrate uncertainty. Dashboards that highlight not only what works, But what could be disproven tomorrow? The unplugged stance becomes a lightweight ethic. Deliberate doubt plus courageous listening, inseparable and humane. Let doubt breathe. Your mind grows